Mr. Leader.
Mr. President and members, would we please recognize Senator Stevens to explain the provisions of Senate Bill 7.
Senator Stevens, you are recognized to present the information on Senate Bill 7. Senator Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Leader. The sun is certainly shining bright in the state of Oklahoma this morning. Senate Bill 7 would simply lock the clock on daylight saving time, giving us an additional hour of daylight in the evening in the winter months. This bill has a trigger on it. Congress would have to pass the Sunshine Protection Act before we could stop the clock here in Oklahoma. In the past 4 years, there's been a monumental movement to lock the clock across America on daylight saving time. It has gained momentum, and there are now 19 states that have passed legislation to stop the clock in their respective states on daylight saving time. The passing of this bill would set Oklahoma to be the 20th state to stop the madness of switching our clocks back and forth twice a year, and we would be sitting in the driver's seat when Congress gets the Sunshine Protection Act across the finish line. Mr. President, members, I have been working diligently on this legislation for the past 3 years. I've done extensive research as well as running an interim study here at the Capitol. It revealed an extensive list of benefits ranging from improved quality of life, reduced crime, and will boost the economy, just to mention a few. With that, Mr. President, I yield for questions and move for advancement at the appropriate time.
That concludes the explanation of Senate Bill 7. Will there be questions? Questions on the bill? Senator Hamilton, you're recognized for a question on the bill. Senator Hamilton waves. Senator Hicks, you're recognized for a question on Senate Bill 7.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do appreciate the author's extensive research in bringing forth this piece of legislation. I'm just curious to know if there are any organizations that are supporting daylight savings over standard time, and maybe if you could share some of the reasons in which they feel like daylight savings time as opposed to standard time would be the way to lock the clock.
Thank you for that question. Yes, there's numerous organizations that support this. American Farmers and Ranchers is part of their policy on locking this on daylight saving time rather than standard time. Also, I've spoke with many mayors across the state of Oklahoma that are also excited about this. The chambers across the country actually support this. So there's many reasons why the mental health field especially can see a silver lining in this, if you will, on addressing seasonal depression or SAD, seasonal affective disorder. So like I say, there's a ton of benefits, and I hope that answered your question.
Senator Hicks, you're recognized for a follow-up on Senate Bill 7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Is it true that the American Medical Association is opposed to locking in daylight savings time and actually supports standard time?
Thank you again for the question. They actually do support locking the clock on standard time. However, that being said, I've talked to many doctors and nurses throughout the state of Oklahoma as well that don't agree with that. In fact, there's research out there that shows that this is an area where there's research backing both sides.
Senator Hicks, you're recognized for a follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. President. So as we do our diligence in weighing the weight, I guess, of this decision of locking the clock to daylight savings time, what do you feel like the most compelling arguments are for daylight savings time as opposed to standard time?
Thank you for the question. There is a truckload of benefits, a truckload, a semi-truckload, a train load, if you will, This could take us the rest of the day to talk about all the benefits, but I will certainly make this as brief as I can. Right now, Oklahoma is number 3 in childhood obesity nationally. Number 3. We're projected to be number 1 in childhood obesity by the year 2030. By moving that first hour of daylight to the end of the day in the wintertime, which is a warmer day or hour of the day, those children, when they get home from school, or if they're even after-school programs, would be able to play and engage outside activities. That would address that right there. Our economy would be also gaining a huge boost in this area in the wintertime because they'd have another hour to shop, and they would be engaged in the revenue stream. Unlike what would happen if we locked the clock on standard time. If we lock the clock on standard time, we lose 238 hours of daylight in the evenings. You heard me right, 238 hours because you lose 1 hour a day. I can't even begin to imagine what that would look like with our mental health, let alone our economy. So this is a huge issue, and this is why I'm so passionate about this bill, is because I've done the research. I know what the best way is. And by the way, a great question that you're asking me. There is 19 states that could have went to standard time. And by the way, we don't need Congress to lock our clock right now on standard time. We don't need them at all. They gave us the permission years ago to lock it. But you know, not one of those 19 states chose to do that. There's only 2 states in the United States that have locked it on standard time, and that is Arizona and Hawaii.
Senator Hicks for follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate your comments about childhood obesity. Obviously, being one of the chairs of our diabetes caucus, we know that it's a real threat to the health and well-being of our kids. One of the biggest concerns that I have received from my constituents in moving to daylight savings time is the public safety implications of having children catching their bus in darkness. Do you feel that the benefits outweigh the detriments when it comes to public safety concerns of making sure that our kids get to school safely?
Thank you for that great question. Absolutely not. I am not in a compromising position to compromise anybody's life. In fact, the research shows that just the opposite of what people might believe is this is a safer environment. It's the truth. And I drove a school bus for over 20 years in the state of Oklahoma. And by the way, I actually drove a school bus in the beginning of my education career in the state of Texas. Picked up kids in the dark. Right now, on the status quo, what we've lived over the last 100 years, I picked them up in the dark in the mornings, and on those long bus routes in rural Oklahoma, I took some kids home in the dark. Never had one incident. And on that note, because of my training, professional training as a bus driver for school kids, getting them home safely in the evening and safely in the morning to school, research shows too that these bluebird days, when we have no inclement weather, that we still have issues, harm to our students. They're playing around, they're feeling comfortable, whatever. And the truth is, there's fatalities on those days. So we're not compromising safety at all. This, in fact, helps us with the safety. We could also talk about safety in the workplace, safety on our highways, and it definitely, the sun shines through on this subject as well, and it stands for daylight saving. Thank you for all your questions. I appreciate it.
Further questions on the bill? Senator Burns, you're recognized for a question on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, does this have anything to do with TikTok?
Thank you for the question. TikTok, it depends, I guess, on what you're referring to. Can I get some clarification? It absolutely has to do with the tick of our clock.
Are there further questions on the bill? Minority Leader Floyd, you're recognized for a question on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. So if this bill passes and we go this direction, because let me be clear, we do need to stop flipping the clock twice a year. I think everybody agrees with that. But the science I've read has us landing on the other side and locking in at that place. So can you explain to me how childhood obesity is directly tied to this? Because you said the childhood obesity will be eradicated, my word, not yours, if we pass your bill.
Thank you for that question. No, I don't. If I said eradicated, I don't remember saying that this morning, or that it would ever eradicate childhood obesity. I said it would address that issue that we have in the state of Oklahoma. I'm sorry if I gave you some confusion there. So down those lines of how is this better than locking the clock on standard time is because, let me share with some information quickly with you. According to the International Journal of Environmental Research in Public Health in 2020, overexposure to artificial light, and by the way, if we went to standard time, we would be doing what the state of Alaska does, and we'd have mood lamps, we'd have artificial light, so that we'd be getting that artificial light in place of the natural light that we now receive. That would cause a lack of healthy daylight outdoors. It would be too much artificial device light, which would be these things right here, our phones, our computers, all those kinds of things play into that. It leads to vitamin D deficiency, melatonin suppression, and a drop in serotonin, production, which leads to sleep loss, obesity, anxiety, and depression. And by the way, since we're talking about childhood obesity, it's important to note that that is also leads a tendency to lead to abuse with drugs and alcohol and addictive behaviors.
Minority Leader Floyd for a follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. President. You also said that this would be better for the economy because people will shop more. So what statistics do you have that that's going to happen?
Thank you so much for that question. Yes, it will be a huge boost to our economy. Common sense tells us that. If you don't mind indulging me here to explain what I'm talking about. When it gets dark in the wintertime, or any time for that matter, people quit driving. When they quit driving, they quit spending. So what this would do would allow that 1 hour in the evening in the winter months, and then therefore they would still be driving and pumping money into our economy. Restaurants tell me the same thing, that once we have a time change, whether we're going forward or backward, they lose 2 weeks of business. And that, if you do the math on that, that'd be simple 1 month or 30 days that they're losing business on that. So tourism would flourish, and as well as other businesses. This is a pro-business model. Our young people actually have trouble with the headlights, with these new LED lights that we have on our headlights on our vehicles. That's blinding. So it's not just about our senior community anymore, it's about everyone.
Senator Floyd for a follow-up on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, I appreciate the indulgence of the author, but so better for the economy because there'll be more shopping. There's not really any statistics for that. That's just a common sense leap we're making there because we don't have any real statistics on how much this will stimulate our economy.
Thank you for the question. I did reach out to the Oklahoma Tax Commission on this 3 years ago, asking because we'll revisit this once this thing is locked in, and I'll give a report on how big of an impact this had. it's going to have a huge impact. They couldn't even give me an estimate. You're looking at 1 hour more a day for 127 days, I believe.
Senator Floyd for a follow-up.
Thank you. And what actual data do we have when you say tourism will flourish?
Okay, thank you for the question. So, been working with our Lieutenant Governor, looking at this as well, and listening to our tourism department. They experience the same thing. They lose business in the winter months. That's their biggest loss.
For a follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. President. So is it possible they lose business in the winter because it's cold and icy and snowing? I mean, it's just people have a tendency to stay in more during the winter. Is it possible that that's the reason they lose business?
Thank you for the question. Today we're on standard time. I believe I looked at the weather report for today. The sun's shining, and it's going to be 70 some odd degrees today. So not every day in the wintertime do we have snow flying. Thank God, because I've got cattle, and ice and those kinds of things. Yes, those things occur, but it's also, thank you for your question, but we've got to look at this, you know, across the whole spectrum of what we're talking about here.
For a follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I believe this question was asked, and I apologize I didn't hear the answer. This suggestion goes against the recommendations of the American Medical Association. So how can we align their objection to this and locking it in instead of using permanent standard time and locking it in on permanent standard time, which is what the Medical Association suggests? Why are we going against that suggestion and that recommendation from the healthcare experts?
Thank you for the question. Because of the 4 million reasons why we need to pass it into daylight saving time, because of all the other things. Like I said before, there is research on both sides that support this, one way or the other, right? So even though they came out against it, let me, you know, here's what I keep coming back to, because I come out of the mental health field. Right now, we have seasonal depression that I spoke of earlier. And that right there should be enough reason for us to do it this way on locking the clock on daylight savings time. If we do it the other way, which, by the way, we haven't done in over 100 years, I believe that it would be a huge mistake for us in our mental health. We have 1 out of 4 Oklahomans right now that are seeking help and requesting help here in the state of Oklahoma. And those are our adults. If we lose 1 hour a day for 238 days in a row that we've never seen before in our generation, why wouldn't that play into this discussion rather than just what the American Medical Association says on this other issue with circadian rhythm?
For follow-up.
So, thank you, Mr. President. So you're not saying, are you, that every mental health issue we have in the state will be solved because every mental health issue we have in the state is because of the daylight savings time?
Thank you for the question. I'm absolutely not saying that. What I'm trying to say, I apologize for not being clear on this. My vision, if we go and lock the clock on standard time, I can only imagine how that's going to increase mental health issues in the state of Oklahoma. I can only imagine that. Taking away that light, that natural light that's got vitamin D in it, all the chemicals in our body that affects our brain and our bodies. It's just, to me, it's just common sense.
Other questions on the bill? Senator Hayes, you're recognized for a question on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I've been listening to the different conversations, and I know childhood obesity came up, but did I understand or related to this that if we make this switch, that our kids now will put away their video games, their phones, and actually go outside and play like used to take place? Am I understanding that correctly?
Thank you, Mr. President. That's exactly what you're hearing me say. Me being raised on a farm and a ranch myself, and man, back in the day when we go out and fish when we come home from school, and I can see that happening again. You know, we have a lot of 4-H and FFA members across the state of Oklahoma that would go out and take care of their animals. And, you know, I haven't talked about it much, actually at all this morning, but 65% of our livestock producers in the state of Oklahoma make their living off the farm and off the ranch. They're part of what I call the hardcore headlight society because they've always got a headlamp stuck to their head before they go to work and when they get back. I see this as helping all walks of life, all ages, including our young people, absolutely.
Senator Hayes, you're recognized for a follow-up. Senator Hayes waves. Further questions on the bill? Any further questions on Senate Bill 7? Seeing none, Senator Stevens asks unanimous consent that the bill be advanced. Without objection, that will be the order. I declare the bill to be advanced. Members, Senate Bill 7 is before you on third reading and final passage. Will there be debate? Will there be debate on the bill? Senator Stevens, do you wish to close?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members, for tolerating my passion for the last 3 years, locking the clock on daylight saving time. I really do appreciate you. And with no further ado, like my daddy says, hurry up, son, we're burning daylight. With that, Mr. President, I humbly ask for your yes vote.
That concludes debate on Senate Bill 7. The vote will now occur. If you favor the measure, you will vote aye. If you oppose the measure, you will vote nay. The clerk will open the roll. Those wishing to vote or change their vote? Those wishing to vote or change the vote? Clerk's preparing to close. Close the roll. Members, having received 44 aye votes and 3 nay votes, I declare Senate Bill 7 to have passed. Congratulations, Senator.